All right. Hello, everyone listening and watching. My name is Sama Assad. I am an investigative producer and journalist with CBS Chicago. You are listening to our first ever Twitter Space, a series we're calling Inside the Story, that we're really, really excited about, where we're going to take you behind the scenes on our upcoming investigations. But we're calling it a deep dive, really, into how we uncover these stories, just how the sausage is made. You're going to learn a bunch of things from these guys about, specific details on behind the scenes issues that you probably didn't see in actual stories, or you probably will never see, but they're very, very interesting. And so our digital producer, Alyssa Kaufman, shout out to her. She wants to take your questions and we want to answer them. So make sure that you either reply to the latest tweet on CBS Chicago's account about this Twitter space, or just DM us. And so just to get started, because CBS 2 investigator Dorothy Tucker, who's here with us right now, she has an exclusive investigation actually airing this Sunday night after the Grammys.
Grammy night.
Yes, and it's about a scam I think a lot of people are going to be shocked to learn about. I definitely was. And so, it got us thinking, I'll say in Brad's words, the world is just ripe for scams. They were before the pandemic, and I feel like the pandemic just really opened up the door for even more types of scams, and that's what really made us want to focus on that topic today for our first quote-unquote episode of Inside the Story. But before we get into that, I want to just really give everyone a chance, all of our CBS 2 investigators, to introduce themselves. Dorothy, do you want to kick us off?
Yes. So, I'm Dorothy Tucker, CBS 2 investigator. Chicago is home, the west side of Chicago. Shout out to the west side. And I've been here, such a long time. And I really enjoy covering all the stories that I've been doing, especially these scams. And I can't wait to tell you guys all the secret of the sauce, how it's made. I think you'll be really interested, and ask all your questions. And yes, I am going to talk about Candace Clark. So don't go away.
The serial scammer.
Yeah.
Right.
So I will cede my role here. I mean, this is more Dave and Dorothy and Carol's specialty, but I do a little anchoring. I also do some water bills.
How you doing?
Hi, how are you?
We're here to pay this man's water bill.
Kind of the water bill guy. And then, but I've done my, fair share of scams. And, kind of my guiding compass in reporting is, if you have something that is demonstrably wrong, you try to make it right. And that's our goal here. And that's what we've been doing here. And we've really been kicking butt at it. And it can be demonstrably through data, or demonstrably just through a series of anecdotes, enough people that it's happened to. And the goal of this chat is to empower you. We want to see ultimately less victims of these things.
Yeah. Dave?
Which comes to me. I'm Dave
Perfect
Savini,
segue.
and I'm one of the investigative reporters here.
White Sox parking, right?
We ain't doing
White
no
Sox
foul,
No. You're selling illegal you're selling stickers, man.
Been doing this for almost 30 years in Chicago, and 20 years here, a decade over at NBC, and have done countless scam stories. And one of the contributions I hope to make here in the next half hour or so is what happens with me on these stories and my teams when we're out on the street doing the surveillance and the undercover work. It starts with a tip from you.
Yeah.
It starts with an idea or something, a friend of yours, a family member got scammed, got ripped off, could be dealing with a car, could be a used car salesman, could be a new car salesman, could be a donation scam, a charity, could be anything really, and that's how it comes to us. And then we got to take the ball and run with it. And that is a lot of rolling up the sleeves, sitting in an undercover van, and then waiting to catch the scammers in action. And so I hope to give you a little bit of the little inside peek at what I do when I'm out on the stories. And I work a lot with Sama Assad.
I just want to know why you've signed off on so many search warrants.
On the investigative series Unwarranted, which was the police raiding wrong homes. And I also work with Carol Thompson, the producer, working with Dorothy Tucker on the story that you're going to see on Grammy night involving a really big scam that you're going to love. So that's my segue to you, Carol.
Perfect transition.
Right. So I'm Carol Thompson.
So how many people like me are there out there wanting to have these?
Oh my God, it's crazy amount. Yeah.
Investigative producer. I work a lot with Dorothy Tucker, work a lot with Brad, and occasionally with Dave. I don't get all the fun undercover shoots with Savini, but you'll
And
hear
you dig
about all
into
those
data
shortly.
with me, so producers unite.
Yes, exactly, right. So as investigative producers, Sama and I work behind the scenes,
I'm just looking to print out documents from the computers.
researching a lot of the stories, and you'll hear something very interesting about Candace Clark and how we got some of the evidence that ultimately, I think, led to her arrest. So we'll talk about that shortly. Stay tuned.
So, perfect segue. This is going great. The perfect transition. So, Dorothy, this upcoming story that you have has to do with a Chicago celebrity.
Yeah.
And remember, this is a scam story. So that immediately intrigued me when I heard about that. I was like, oh my God, we have to talk about this.
So there is a celebrity out there who had absolutely no idea, who has no idea what is really going on with this scam. But somebody is using his or her name and pretending to help people pay their bills. And it's a story that involves banks. It involves people giving away monies because they think here's an opportunity for them to get some of their biggest bills paid off, like their mortgage, like their insurance and telephone bills. And it really does seem to work. It looks like it's real. They're getting some of the most professional people to fall for this scam, and I gotta tell you, it is probably one of the scariest scams that I have ever seen, because there's a little part of me that when I look at how this person put it together, when the way they laid things out and how they were able to make it look so real, you know, I have to admit, you know, would I have fallen for this? You know, I have to ask myself that. So that's really why we want to make sure you watch this, because it's one of those things that, you know, they say if it's too good to be true, you know, you don't believe it. But when you look at all of this, it really kind of makes you think, yeah, this one could be good, this one could be right, this one could be true. And it's not.
But how did you
See,
find
I
out
was gonna
about
say,
it,
so
though?
can you tell us who the celebrity
Yeah,
is?
like, well, yeah, can you, I know you
Not
can't
yet.
tell us yet.
No.
Not yet.
I'm not gonna tell you who the celebrity is for sure, so you gotta watch. Don't do that.
You got to tune
Sunday
in.
night.
Sunday.
Yeah,
But so
Sunday
how
night.
did you find out about, like, did someone call you from the community and tell you got to look into it? Because people ask that question. They just see the story and they're like, how did we come up with this or uncover this?
And that's exactly what happened. You know, and it is one of those stories where a couple of women called me, and you know, the first thing they said was that, I don't believe I fell for this. I can't believe this happened to me. And they were very embarrassed, as so many people are, you know, and initially they were like, I want you to do the story, I want you to tell the story, but I don't want to be on television. So you really spend probably hours on the phone, you know, getting all their information and really assuring them that you are going to be sensitive about their story.
Right.
You know, and, you know, once we got past that,
Well, because I was going to say, because a lot of people, that's a big thing in these interviews. When someone comes to you with a scam, they're so embarrassed.
Yeah.
They don't want to be in the story.
This realtor wants to remain anonymous because, quite frankly, he's a little embarrassed.
We did miss things because we didn't dot all the I's and cross all the T's.
And part of the
They're like
convincing,
ashamed. They're really
they're ashamed.
ashamed.
They feel like, oh, I got duped. Everyone's going to think, you know, I'm stupid. So you have to convince them this could happen to anyone, and it can, and put them at ease, because you need their testimonial to really bring it and make it real.
And that's what we try to do, is destigmatize, because I mean, scam victims have been stigmatized as, for a long time, as if it's their fault, as if they were unsophisticated, as if they weren't smart or savvy. Well, and Dorothy's stories have proven, especially recently, just how sophisticated the scammers have gotten. And they're crime victims. They are crime victims. Like, we don't blame a carjacking victim because they got their car stolen. We should not blame a scam victim, and we need them to talk too, because scammers hold the power if you don't talk. That's what they want.
if you look at Candace Clark, this woman got the Rainbow Coalition of victims. I mean, seriously, she had every race, you know, she had men, she had women, she had rich people, she had poor mothers, she ran the gamut. So that kind of tells you, to your point of, you never know who's going to be the next victim, and the victims come in all colors, sizes.
And this again for the people that don't know, was the woman who continued to lease high-scale homes, high-end homes, year after year with,
Candace Clark.
couldn't be more phony, and people bought it, like
Posed as a government official.
actors hired to make her
She
look.
was living in the Gold Coast,
Yeah.
in mansions,
Right.
$2 million mansions.
So
One
Dorothy,
was
I
down the
have one-
street. One was down the street from Penny Pritzker's mansion. I mean, she had really fancy neighbors.
All right, so let's get to a little bit of empowerment here. Like, what is because nobody is more tipped off to the ripoff than you are, and savvy and scam wary. What's your go-to? Is it Google? I mean, how do you bet when you think something doesn't quite smell right? What's your first call? What's your first web search?
I don't know that it's so much a web search as it is documents. Because the thing about with the scams, and you need the documentation that is proof, that it is really, it happened. So my first question to anyone who comes to me is, do you by any chance have an email? Do you have a text message? And most of them do. And because people communicate in email, so they have the documentation. So, after that, it really comes down to, did you file a police report? Did you complain to somebody at that
Follow
place?
the paper trail.
Yeah, it's a paper trail.
But that's actually,
You start with the target. You start with the person who got scammed, and you have to be your own investigator. We want to see what kind of investigation you did, and then get all the documents you have, because when you get scammed, you're pretty upset, and you usually do as much as you can, and you hit a dead end, and no one's going to help you, and then you call us. So we take everything you have, and then we go with what you have, and then we try to authenticate it, double check, and then we try to find more. Correct?
And then it's the phone calls. Like, for instance, with the Candace Clark story, I tell you, I almost missed that story. I don't know, I almost missed that one. I got a
No
call.
way.
I got a call from a woman who had been scammed by Candace with a real estate deal. And she called me back in May, and she said, hey, this woman pretended she was a real estate agent. She said she was going to help me with this house. Ends up, I'm out of my life savings, And I was like, oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. Call the agent's office, call this, call that. And because we do get people tips. Sometimes you feel like I can't give enough of the story. And in November, she called back and she said, I know you said that, you couldn't do anything at the time, and, but I'm telling you, she's at it again. She's at it again. And, this time I think she's trying to rip off this religious organization. And, it's kind of like, really? And she said, I'm telling you, they're having something tomorrow. They're going to hold something tomorrow. Call this number. I call the people were like, yeah, we are. As a matter of fact, we are. You just jump on that one. That one, I'm just going to go the next day, and sure enough, everything the woman had said. Here Candace Clark had hired 40 or 50 people to pull off the charade that she was being inducted, as some state employee or something. And the whole room was full of people.
So what are you doing? What are you doing?
So, sometimes it's a hunch. And it's being able to react to something and jump on something and go, if I get there and it's nothing, but if it is something, then wow, you got something.
But I want to piggyback off something you said, because when we're talking about documents, Carol, I know that you had a really interesting story. As producers, we oftentimes find ourselves on these paper trails and doing a lot of the, backgrounding and research. And so didn't you say that you somehow ended up in one of Candace Clark's homes, and you ended up stumbling on a couple items that, walk me through that. And how did you connect the dots?
So the paper trail for me started with finding all these other lawsuits involving Candace Clark. Most of them were Candace Clark or Candace Dixon, whatever name she went by. And most of them were evictions, going back decades, evictions. And so you start calling the lawyers involved in those cases, trying to find the people and the landlords who evicted her. and you talked to several of them, and one of them was a gentleman in Oak Lawn who lived in a different house now, but managed from years ago to have kept all of these documents that she left behind in his house. And when I brought back the bucket of documents, there was the evidence of how she put together fake documents to convince a multi-million-dollar homeowner to let her rent their home.
Like fake credit reports?
You know, like those old movies where you see ransom notes with people cutting words out of
Cut it
magazines.
out.
Oh my God.
It was like that.
Wow.
She would cut like the company she claimed to work for, put that logo on a piece of paper, cut out from a sample credit report online, like she has great credit, tape that onto the document, and then copy it and then pass it off as her own CV, her own credit.
So she had a whole
report.
web.
She did,
A
whole
web,
yeah.
yeah.
And that's
she
part
left
about
it behind.
that's part about when you get the tip and you get into the next layer,
Right.
and then you're actually making contact with an element of the scam, and you then use your investigative skills to then say, hey, this is important. We need to, you don't ignore the obvious, right?
Right,
Go- you got to get in there and feel what's happening, and I remember. When we were talking about how people get so nervous about telling their story because they're afraid that people are going to think they got duped, it was really hard to convince all these sports fans, Bulls, Blackhawks, Sox fans. They'd call and say, hey, these guys scammed us, ripped us off, sold us parking passes, and I feel really stupid that I bought them, and I gave the guy $40, and he put me here, and he had the jackets on, the reflective jackets with flashlights, and I'm like, you got to tell me the story. You got to tell it to me on camera so I can, show this happened to you. And they're like, no, people are going to really think, I'm like, no, you got to do it because we will go catch them. And she's like, well, you're going to catch them? Yeah, we're going to go catch them. And so, you're out in the scene just like you were in one of those apartments or one of those spots that she leased. And you're out there and then you see how it really works.
So I'm not going to get told or anything?
No, sir. No, sir.
You see the scam in action. You see the con men in action. And that brings that scam to life. Now you've got real players, playing a role. Con men, Candace Clark becoming somebody that she's not. These guys pretending they're parking attendants when they're not. And it's intriguing in a way, but you just sometimes think if they only put all of this effort to something really constructive, they could probably be really good in the workforce somewhere.
So actually, and I want to take a second too, because I know that there might be some questions coming in. For anyone who just started watching, you're watching Inside the Story with the CBS 2 investigators. You can, if you're watching us on Twitter Spaces, great. You can also actually see us on CBS News Chicago streaming. We're talking about scams, how we uncover it, how the sausage is made, how we do our investigations, and we're also talking about just the types of scams that are impacting our community and tips for how to essentially avoid being a victim. But I want to shout out to Alyssa, our digital producer. What sorts of questions are we getting?
Based on your investigations, how do you protect yourself from being the victim of a scam?
How do you protect
How do you
yourself?
protect yourself from being a victim of a scam? I think, a main thing, and this is something we not only need to protect ourselves, but we need to protect our loved ones because they are so vulnerable. My mom is a widow, is so vulnerable right now. I think if you are ever contacted from someone you don't intimately know about money that you're not expecting, it is a scam. Hands down. Money you're not expecting, it's a scam. Someone you don't know, it's a scam.
Banks don't call you.
No.
Let's just start there. They're not going to call you and say
true.
something's wrong with your account. They're not going to call you and ask you to verify something. They don't make that phone call.
I get those calls
The
all the
IRS,
time these
the
days.
IRS scams.
doesn't call
Hey,
you.
you're going to go to jail.
The
You're going to
police don't
jail.
call you. They don't, they don't do that. So
And people get scared. They call us. They say, I just got a call saying I'm going to go to jail.
yeah.
We get,
People get texts.
yeah.
Who's in charge of our news
Be
department?
careful what you
got a
put on
text
social
today.
media to, the grandparent scam. People, they go on, they'll troll your social media pages, and they will find out enough about you to pretend that they're your grandchild needing money. I mean, we've seen it all. The fake jobs. Anyone sends you money, like, hey, you're going to have this computer job for us. You can work from home, but we're going to send you $5,000 to start. We sent you too much money last week. Can you send us back $2,500? And then you find out the $5,000 check was bogus, and it bounces
So
three days later.
The question to, how do you protect yourself? One, if I do get a phone call in any kind of offer it is, and apologies to anybody who's been nice to me, but I just say no. That's the way I protect myself. I said, I'm sorry. It's just like no to everything. I have a fraud alert at all the credit bureaus on everything. In fact, I was on vacation recently because I have a fraud alert on my debit card. So if you by chance find my debit card, you steal any of my PIN numbers, you won't get more than $100. Unfortunately, I couldn't get more than $100. And I needed more than $100. And I forgot I put the fraud alert on my credit card. So I'm at the ATM going, what? Okay.
Yeah.
But, so I sign up for everything that says how to protect yourself, how to make sure you don't become a victim so that I won't become a victim.
And you have to question everything,
Be a cynic to
Question
literally
it.
everything.
And investigate. If you think this phone call or text or something might be true, call back.
Basic.
If it's a bank or a business or something, call back.
But Google the
Basic,
number
yeah.
first. Do not call back
Do your own
the number.
Google
No,
search.
I mean call the real,
Yeah.
call the real company.
Yeah.
Better
Call
Business
the real
Bureau.
bank.
I don't know.
Attorney General.
Can't
Wait, so
necessarily
that's
do
Well,
actually,
you
wait,
can't.
we were
You can't. But you
we
can
were just gonna-
sometimes get
yeah.
some of the first red flags,
Okay.
but
But
we
a
don't. That's a whole
perfect
nother-
transition. I was,
But
yes.
here's an example. Like, not talking about the overt scams, the
Right,
100% profit. There are so many times where you can just be better consumers. You're not necessarily getting scammed, you're just not doing your due diligence and you want to get something done quickly, like home security. And because you want to do it quickly, you don't do all your due diligence. You're not the best consumer. You make the call, they come out. In a case we found, just one example, a person said they wanted home security. They were promised home security for a couple $100. All of a sudden, the security company came out. Before you know it, there's a hammer in their wall, and they're saying it's going to be 10 times the amount. And I thought, and again, that's not a complete scam.
You just
This
get
is
ripped
under
off.
the guise of legitimate
Yeah.
business.
One of
So then-
one of our colleagues actually asked me about a fence company. So our colleagues call us to ask us to
Right.
Yeah, I
a
think
real
I know who you're
company.
talking-
Yeah.
for them.
She asked me
Right.
too.
So we then started looking at Yelp reviews, and you just got to dig a little deeper. Then we found one person after another saying this company would come in and they'd say you'd get it for $200, and before you know it, there was a hammer in their wall.
But listen
and
to
they were
this, the
stuck.
BBB review was absolutely
Man,
flawless.
You have 1,600 complaints with you guys, yet an A+ rating. How?
They are prompt in addressing their complaints, and they do that in good faith.
So you will consider something resolved even if the customer is still unhappy and claims the company is lying?
Correct. The consumer can.
So if
try
you were
all
just
kinds
going off of that, so they're
Just going by the BBB
Right.
review, so then we dug deeper and realized, so they are rated an A by the BBB out of Indianapolis, where this company is. But to get that rating, you pay for it. You have to be accredited. You pay the Better Business Bureau for that accreditation.
So it's not
And
objective. It's not credible,
Not.
really.
It's not. And then how many people you say, well, look, call the Attorney General's office? Well, how many people actually who get duped say, I'm going to call the Attorney General's office? Da, da, da. Once you get duped, you're done with it.
Yeah.
But then there's also companies that actually call themselves the name of a company that does have an A rating on the Better
And
Business
it
Bureau.
confuses the public.
Yeah, and it confuses the
Yeah.
public because because there's that thought that that's all I got to do to cover my bases. But it just reminds me, there was a guy we called him Mr. Freeze, or his victims called him Mr. Freeze, and he was going around and he was using the name of a very popular Chicago area heating and cooling company. But he was just one guy with a van who was playing off the Yellow Pages listing, and people would call it, and he'd come out, had the same name, and he would bang apart their boilers or their heating systems just enough to ruin them. and then get the down payment to fix everything, $5,000, and then he wouldn't come back. Leave
Construction
these
scams
people
are
freezing.
at the top of the list.
Yeah.
You know, because you need the work done in your home.
And you want it done right away.
And you want it done right away. So, you know, a rule of thumb is to, when the contractor, you know, says, I need so much money down, don't give them all of it. Don't give them half of it. You know, pay as you go. You're gonna give them a third of it, they do a third of the work, give them another third, and don't give it all to them until it's done and it works, and you know for sure that the floor is not gonna sink after they leave, you know, so whatever it is. So that's kind of one rule of thumb to make sure that generally you won't get ripped off.
Yeah, and Dave, I kind of want to go into your White Sox parking investigation, because I think a lot of the questions that we get is how we do surveillance and hidden camera, and people ask a lot about how that's done.
You even went on surveillance on that one.
Yeah, we went.
Posing as a fan.
Has it ever taken you to sit somewhere? How long have you ever sat waiting for someone?
Well, you know, I've sat on the house, I've sat on people watching, and you know, with the team for weeks. You don't go back every day. You gotta kind of have to go, because people say, oh, that same vehicle, or you gotta switch vehicles too. I think it's the tailing is the
You mean
hardest.
following
Yeah,
somebody?
when you're gonna tail them.
Isn't that kind of
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
you know?
you have to use a
Traffic laws and
Yeah,
whatnot.
you have to use
That's
two
important.
cars, 2 or 3 cars to tail people.
Yeah,
You know.
and then you've done this, all of you. The worst part about it, when you're trying to wait for somebody to come outside of the courthouse, and how
Yeah.
many entrances
Sure.
are there to it? So you've got like, you know, you
Yeah.
have to figure out.
You have the people stationed. But here's the thing, though, with that investigation, see, sometimes it's easy to figure out if a company is questionable, because sometimes they're out in the open about it. They make very easy mistakes. It's easy to find, you know, kind of
Right.
red flags, but there are companies who kind of operate in the guise of, you know, they're not out there about their issues. And
They're sort
I
of
feel
low-level scammers.
Yeah, and so I feel
Yeah,
like
not complete scam, not complete
Yeah.
rip-off.
Yeah.
It's like they're just on that line.
So the
you
thing
know?
about this one,
So the parking one, I feel like, is one of those, because
Yeah.
you had to do a lot of surveillance and hidden camera work to really get a pattern of
because you have to
them.
actually catch them giving you the phony pass, and then, you know, you ask them how much it is, and then they give it to you, and then you're like, oh, okay, and I can park here and it'll be okay, right? And of course you won't, you're gonna get a ticket, you're gonna get a double whammy, and the scammers are gonna go free, because no one cared about that. And so you had to go and catch them, and you had to go repeatedly, because in when Chicago sports teams, Bulls and White Sox, and the Hawks, Blackhawks, if the team isn't doing well, it's not a really great team they're playing, they're not going to have a big crowd. So you got to go on the really big crowd, like the crosstown rivalry between the Cubs and the Sox, going to have a big crowd. The
But
playoff game.
I remember you were starting that, though, like pre-COVID.
Pre-COVID.
Like, I think I went on one with you, and we were sitting in a car for hours, and I don't even think we
Yep.
saw anything that day.
No.
So that's part
But-
of it.
And that's
Yeah,
the thing,
sometimes you don't get
sometimes you're on these investigations for months.
This one spanned 2.5 years.
2.5 years,
And COVID got in the middle of it, but, you know, in the end, we were relentless. And we not only caught him outside the United Center, we caught him outside the guaranteed rate field.
And sometimes you just get lucky. Dorothy, your rogue towing story, you just happened upon an accident that happened and a tow truck that showed up.
The third night.
Yeah.
We, you know, I mean,
Right.
we went out every night, kind of looking to see what tow trucks would be doing, you know, if we could find somebody. And then, you know, you're just driving around the city, going to different neighborhoods, and you have to be very patient, very, very patient. And you get hungry a lot. I do. You know, so.
And really quickly, for anyone who's watching on the stream, we're about to wrap up our stream on CBS News Chicago, but you can continue to listen on our Twitter space at CBS Chicago. And I think we have another question from our Alyssa Kaufman from Twitter.
If I'm the victim of a scam, how can I get in contact with the CBS to investigate?
Great question.
Love that question.
If I'm a victim of a scam, how do I get in touch with CBS 2 investigators? Dave, give me your cell.
We have a hotline.
We got a tip line.
You can, you know, yeah, we have a tip line. You can just go, you go on our social media pages and send us messages. You can also email us through the CBS Chicago website. You click on our bios, takes you right to us. At the bottom of every story we do, it shows you how to get to our social media pages too, and our email.
And I think the audience needs to know, we listen to those tip lines every day.
Yeah.
Every day. So, you know, don't think that you're wasting your time. And we try and get back to everybody. Obviously, it's a lot. We do try to get back to everybody. And sometimes it is not a story that we can do right away because perhaps you don't have the documentation. Perhaps we don't have enough evidence. But, we will engage you and maybe give you a tip, give you some suggestions on what you might do to be able to help yourself if we aren't going to do that story. Because, obviously, there are a lot of stories that are out there.
I mean, it's interesting. So with the scams, and I can vouch for Dorothy and Dave on this, is they basically have to take a victim of a crime that doesn't rise to the level of violence. So it's not going to get the attention of the state attorney's office. It's not going to get the attention of prosecutors. So they have to take that and then basically build a legal case. Build a legal case against Candace Clark. Build a legal case, something that will cross the threshold of legality. So then that's not going to come back at us.
Because these are private people,
These
private
are private
companies.
people. So we need to do just gads of due diligence to put one of these things on the air to eventually warn you about.
Receipts on receipts.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's what happens, once we dig in, and we find the pattern. The police do sometimes get involved. It reminds me of this series we did called The Boot Bandit.
James, I'm Dave Savini from Channel 2. There are allegations that you've been booting people all across the Chicago area.
There was a guy that was putting booting cars in private parking lots to truck drivers and to families, and he would put his own sign up to say, if you park here, you're going to get booted, and there's a fine, and he just put the signs up. He had no contract to do it. And he'd been doing this for years, and he never got in trouble. He did get arrested, finally, after we did the story, but he got away with it. He did it all over the suburbs, all over the city, and he was getting away with it. And we actually, caught him, put the pressure on by exposing the victims, and these truck drivers were getting $2,000 tickets. And he would say, well, I'm going to call the police if you got to pay me to take the boot off. And these truck drivers have a full load on their truck. They've got to get to point A to point B, and their companies will pay the money. They'll send them the money to get
It's like a ransom.
It's like a ransom.
But they got to get the freight there.
So stories like that, the guy I was talking about, Mr. Freeze, who was ripping people off with heating and cooling, eventually the state's attorney's office said, oh, wow, you know what? This is a white-collar crime, but it should be treated as a felony and not a misdemeanor. Often they say it's a civil contract. It's a breach of contract. It's not a criminal case. But when they do it over and over and over again, they rip you off people over and over again, it's a pattern, and it rises to the level of a crime, and it rises above a misdemeanor to a felony.
Well, let's talk about impact, though. I mean, that's perfect. Tell our listeners a little bit about any change that we might have gotten.
I'll go with.
Have you guys gotten any money back for people? Have you guys any charges?
We can go with our water bills. There's nothing illegal about water bills, but we've gotten people hundreds of thousands of dollars back on bogus water bills from the city. As for our defense company, they come and they put an alarm in your place. I mean, and they had an A+ rating from the BBB. They didn't have a lot of complaints with the Attorney General in any state. They were called defenders. Really, in pretty quick order after we exposed them, I believe it was Super Bowl night, we did our expose, 7 to 8 minute piece. In pretty quick order, they sold themselves to ADT and lost their rating, and that was it. But if you look at ADT, they get a lot of those complaints too. People think they're getting one deal, and you're getting another. I wish I had everyone needs to be as skeptical and as savvy as Dorothy. And I think, Dorothy, you said it, I think, just about best. You just say no to everything, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And in terms of impact for our stories, we did and have been doing a series of stories on speed cameras. We have found wrong signs. I think probably a couple of years ago, I remember we did a story on a ticket that was wrong, and I think the city basically had to refund hundreds of tickets to the tune of a couple $100,000. And then Carol, the last story was on the wrong sign. The
wrong speed camera warning sign. Right. 2 of them in the city, but resulted in $1.8 million
yeah,
back.
$1.8 million.
To dismiss tickets.
This
That
is the
city-
government
Yeah.
ripping you off.
Is forced to pay. And I hope within the next few days, the tow stories that a number of investigators have done over the years, we've been on all of those, on top of those stories.
On track
how,
on track for new legislation.
Exactly.
Dorothy, I remember when that speed camera story aired, the next day, our tip line was flooded with people who said the same thing happened to them. So it's like,
And
it's
we
so,
followed up because of that.
and it's so critical so that if something like that happens, people tell us. I know it can
Right.
be hard, right? Maybe you feel ashamed that you fell for something, or maybe you feel upset, or you don't want to be on camera, whatever it may be, but come to us and talk to us about it, because you might
And
be
we
able
do
to
have
help,
more
you might be
of
able to
those
help other
stories to tell.
people.
Well, here's the thing, you're sitting there, you see our story, and we did a follow-up, and the story comes up and it says, there was a wrong sign up there, and all these people get paid, and then you sit back and you go back and you think, wait a minute, I drive by that sign. Well,
Yeah.
and
It's
we
amazing how
discover-
people reach out on those situations.
Yeah.
I mean, you do. Sometimes it's not a huge pattern, but it's just one screw up, and it turns into, this happens all over the place. We do the story, and then we find out.
People realize that it happened to me too.
Street cleaning, the lady contacts us about the street cleaning. They put the sign on the wrong side of the street, and they gave her son a ticket. And we go out there and find all kinds of problems. People getting tickets where they shouldn't because they didn't even have the signs that anyone could see. She got her money back. He got the money back for that ticket. That's small, right? One ticket, but it means a lot because it happens to a lot of people. We got cars paid for by companies that ripped them off, car companies. We've got a home for a veteran who had his legs blown off in the war, and sometimes it's not a person scammer, sometimes it's the government who forgot that because he's a veteran who has had this disability, he's supposed to have his property tax waived, and he had a home built for him by a group that builds homes for veterans like this, and he was going to lose a home because he didn't have the money to pay the property tax, and the government was coming at him for a lien. And we did the story, and he got his home.
I think you're going to see the story that we're doing Sunday, as I said, is really one of the most fascinating stories that I've done in a long time. And I think when I think in terms of impact, I think we're going to see some institutional changes here because of this story. Because of what these victims have gone through in the loophole that they have uncovered.
Well, and
So
that
hold
loophole-
on, because we are way.
Oh, we're way over.
Yeah.
Well, no, but you gotta go.
We have
But
a-
we gotta tell
a few
people
more
what
minutes.
exactly it is on Sunday. If
Oh.
they didn't hear 37 minutes.
Right,
ago.
right, that's right,
It's
that's
a
right.
scam. It is the
Bring it back.
scam of scam.
It's a scam
Of somebody,
because
somebody important.
they're using a very popular, famous person from Chicago to carry out this scam. And that is one of the things that makes it believable. It is, again, it also involves the banks, which makes it believable. So they've got a good combination that has convinced nearly a dozen people to fall for it. And they are out of thousands and thousands of dollars. It is
Tens of thousands.
Yeah, and it's sad because of that. But Carol, you were about to say.
But the loophole in the way that these banks and banks do business could convince anyone, could convince all of us, even the most skeptical of us.
So the banks should be watching, is what you're
They
saying.
better watch. They better watch and they need to make some changes. They need
Well,
to
They need to
fix
make some
this.
changes.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
They do.
So that is Sunday night after the
After
Grammys.
the Grammys.
And we got another minute.
And we
or-
don't know
yeah.
who. Dave and I are like, who's the star? Who's
I think I'm the only, me and Carol are the only people who know
They're not
who
even
it
telling
is.
us.
Only three of us.
You'll have to watch, yes. And so we have another minute or so. Any last words to anyone watching for what they should look out for? Any tips as we wrap this up? What do
I
you guys
just want
got?
to say one thing.
Yeah.
Look out for your loved ones. Because if you're tuning into us, you're thinking about it.
You care about it.
You care about
Yeah.
it. If you're not actively thinking that, which you need
Yeah.
to be, your next door neighbor, you just have to. It's got to be a part of the conversation nowadays. Our mothers, our grandparents, we got to look out for each other.
I would say to you that if you get scammed and you feel like you got scammed and you're talking to the scammer, maybe it's a company and you believe you got cheated, Don't be afraid to throw in, we're going to call CBS Chicago.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because people do it all the time.
They get scared.
And yeah.
They'll get more scared if you threaten to expose them on media or social media than if you call the authorities. Because again, the authorities will say, hey, it's a civil matter, it's a money matter, it's not a crime, it's not violence.
But oftentimes it can be a crime and has been a crime,
Yeah.
too,
And
which they don't realize.
Oh, sorry. If you think you've heard of every scam out there, think again, because we've
Especially
spoken,
during COVID.
Yeah.
Especially during COVID.
We've spoken
Yeah.
to experts who say as soon as you fix whatever the leak is over here, they come up with something new and a new way to trick you and a new way to convince you.
And you know, I will add that the one thing that CBS 2 has is this team. You know, and so if you look at, combine what we do, what we uncover, and how we're able to help the community, I mean, it's just kind of, if you want to be educated, if you want to be protected, if you want to make sure that you're learning, you know, then you just need to regularly tune in, because
Right.
that's what we do. That's what
I mean,
we
it's
do.
like
We
just in
help.
the past years, laws passed and millions of dollars retrieved for you, because you're the reason we do. We are working. We don't say it because it's a cliche slogan, but we are working for you.
It's true. That's
Because
why
we
do
have
what we
loved
do.
ones here, because we have family here.
Right.
Because,
This is our
you know, this
community.
is- yeah.
A lot of times it's tax money that's involved.
So
too.
send us those messages, send us those tips.
Yes, yes.
Exactly.
And thank you, everyone, for tuning in to our Inside the Story with our lovely CBS 2 investigators, and thank you for watching on the stream. Again, do not miss Dorothy's scam investigation this Sunday night after the Grammys. I believe it'll be at 10?
Yes.
Yes.
Or whenever the Grammys
10
is.
So don't, if you don't say right at 10,
Yeah,
don't
yeah, don't.
stop watching,
Don't
all right?
leave
Because
early.
you do not want to miss this. Thanks again, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.